Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome to another bonus episode in the ARC podcast. Today I am here with Danielle, who Danielle, I'm thinking I've known you for over 10 years, might be even longer
my gosh.
at this
It can't
point.
be a
Can you believe
decade.
that?
I'm not old enough to have friends for more than a decade.
To give you the credit, I actually met you when you were very young and you had started your own practice. But let's start off with where you are now. So please introduce yourself and give us a feel of like where are you located and what is your role and what work do you do?
Yeah, of course. So Danielle Supkis Cheek, to help on the whole name because that's a mouthful sometimes. I'm the SVP of AI Analytics and Assurance at CaseWare. I'm based out of Houston. And I think that was the name, rank, and serial number we're looking for.
Okay, perfect. And definitely in the way that you just described yourself, you are a non-traditional accountant, and that's part of what we're highlighting in these episodes. So tell us a little more about what you do today. This AI, it's definitely the current hype.
Indeed.
And you're not an IT person, so why are you doing all this AI stuff?
Yeah, so my background is on the pure assurance side. I started my career at EY. And so there's an element of traditional in my background, but my undergrad was actually in political science, economics, and policy studies. And I used to work on Capitol Hill. So an extra twist that you didn't even know about.
I did not know that.
It's a varied career. But what I do now is, there's just so much capability and so much information that's out there. So what I really like to do is help the software companies, and this is my it's technically my third software company that I've worked for, help them understand what our customers are doing with our products in a really deep way, like really getting into the heads of our customers and understanding the pain points. And one of the things that's my favorite work to do is rethinking how we can do something to get to a same or better outcome, but in a way differently. So for example, I was asked recently, well, what if we gave me an optimizer first so that I got the list shorter and then it can automate the filling out of a checklist? And I go, well, yeah, we can do that, but that's what you do today. Actually, what I want to do is I want to do the checklist first on every single thing, build it up, and then provide you a summary view afterwards, because then I can actually give you more insights and say, look, I've checked off 75% of this other area. Is this a new risk? Is this something you didn't know about? Because you're already checking things for this particular issue. So it's taking the really traditional understanding of the workflows and processes, and I've spent a lot of time in the standard setting arena and near the standard setters and regulators, and then taking that and applying it to how the technology can impact methodology and vice versa. So I really like this intersection where I effectively translate a bunch of different languages for people, because there are a lot of different subdomains out there. And so how do you make it so that everybody can actually understand each other? And that's where I like to think I shine the most. But it takes a really deep technical understanding of a lot of different verticals. And you're right, I'm not an IT professional. I do sometimes make stupid comments and have to go look it up, but I do love to learn. So I just learn really quickly. And I'm not afraid to ask what is seemingly a dumb question, but many times actually isn't a dumb question.
Yes, very much a technique a lot of us that are in consulting and advisory services do.
Mm-hmm.
Before I forget to ask you real quick, what credentials do you hold?
CPA, CFE, and CBA. So that's forensics and then valuation.
Right.
Yep, on top of the CPA.
On top of the
And
CPA.
only in Texas. There we go. I'll get all of our
It's
mobility
very
matters.
regulatory, so we need to make sure we follow all of that. um, let's kind of take a step back because I mean I can obviously hear how passionate you are about this work. I mean, part of the reason I wanted to interview you was just this whole intersection of all of these things, baffles a lot of us. Most of us are just on that receiving end. Okay, here's the
Mhm.
standard, it's been written. They don't realize that a lot of times, whether it's I'm going to start with the way it's supposed to sort of happen, which
Mhm.
is there's an international standards change that has been kind of talked through and figured out, and then it trickles down, and each of the countries kind of adopts that in to theirs. A lot of times in here in the U.S., we tend to do our own thing first, and then
Mhm.
we see what happens. And so there's all this navigation that you're doing, which I'm glad you're doing, and I can now understand why you do it because you have all that political science and other stuff there. I would not want to do that stuff; it would drive me crazy. But what's the background? You started with what your bachelor's is. What's your kind of background and how did you come to do this?
Oh, so when I started my own firm at a pretty young age, I was actually 29 when I started a firm, just before my 30th birthday. And that's really young to start a firm. And most people will believe that means I'm not qualified to run a firm. I had actually been managing a firm for the better part of 5 years, of somebody else's firm. So again, you're going to think again, unqualified for running a firm at 24 or 25. Don't worry. I was properly oversighted and I was knowing what I was doing, and I learned a lot there. And so, but when I started my firm, it was really hard to, it's feast or famine on getting clients. Like you have to get clients when you're running a firm. And so I kind of took a step back, and because my firm was an insurance practice, part of my reputation really mattered for being able to build trust with my customers. And I also did a lot of forensics. And so being able to be credible on the witness stand and all those different things. So I really did and sat back and thought, what do I need to do so that my age is not my own like undoing? So I'm not perceived as being not an expert because of my age alone, but really show through my qualities. And then my age is just a number that happens to be the case based on a piece of paper. And so I thought about, you know what? I really want to have this national voice and be nationally known for really key narrow scope things that I really enjoyed, and got everybody that knows me knows I get super nerdy about a couple things and nerd out on like the most archaic, really narrow scope specific things, but I love it. But then how do I apply that and be the local firm that I wanted to be? Because I really wanted to have this really local hand-holding white glove experience with my firms to get this really tailored, customized, high CX customer experience type thing. So I was like, well, I need a national voice, and I need to be affiliated with some kind of like fancy institution, like a major institution. And I was like, well, I'll get on a national committee. I did that. And that's what really opened up a world of opportunity and understanding and things that I didn't even know existed. And then I also went and became a part-time faculty at Rice University too. And so then nobody would ever be able to question my age or resume. They could go question my thoughts, absolutely. But you're not going to say I don't know what I'm talking about. I absolutely know what I'm talking about. You can still disagree with me. We can still hash it out. But I needed to build that foundation so that my age wasn't considered. And I think things have gotten better in that space, but I am, as you said, a little bit old now.
Well, if
In
it
tech,
makes
I'm actually really young. I mean, in tech, I'm really old. In
in tech,
accounting,
you're
I'm
really
actually
old.
still very young.
Well, it's funny because I one of my memories of you is, and actually I can still see it very clearly, that
Uh-oh.
first time we had dinner at that restaurant. And we were talking about this, and you told me some of this, and I told you actually the same. So for myself, I actually started my firm at 25. I was almost 26, but still
Mm-hmm.
technically 25 there. And mine was very much the same. I was getting additional credentials. In my case, it was the CITP, and
Yep,
I
that's a good one.
volunteered for the IT, what was then called the IT Executive Committee at AICPA, to also same have that local firm because I was here in Hawaii and I was just starting out with my firm, but I wanted to have that national level credential sitting behind me and involvement sitting behind me. And that was a way, even at my age, that I was able to differentiate and totally have credibility. And same as you. And I also used to do this thing where I would always only have phone calls. This is before we had Teams and Zooms and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I always only have phone calls first because I wanted them to hear my expertise on the phone, and then I would meet them in person afterwards, because then they would see how young I was and already couldn't discredit from the first impression.
That is such a good tip, because I may have pulled that one too.
Well, you listening, all of you, especially you younger ones out there listening, that's the way to do that one, to overcome that. It's a little harder now because it's a little.
Yeah, I was gonna say, who picks up a phone call these days?
Yeah. Well, so how long did you run your own firm, and what did you dislike about that? Because you don't do that anymore.
Yeah, so I had it for about 5 years. Love the concept of owning my firm. Love the entrepreneurial, love the being in charge. The hard part is we were growing, we were doing well. Payroll gets scary. Like when you get to the point where you can't cover payroll by covering it with a personal check to fund it. And by the way, there's always a timing difference for doing that. For anybody that hasn't run a firm, you can't just up in one day be like, I'm not going to make payroll today. I can transfer the money in time. Sometimes you can't transfer it fast enough. And so it was getting big enough that it was getting scary, but in a good way. But I was trying to build an assurance practice. And forensics, and it was becoming very difficult to find the right niche in that space, particularly as I wanted to see the forensics practice grow a bit. I was really struggling. I was being kind of accidentally creating this CAS practice along the way. So we'd get forensic customers and they want us to stay on and do the CAS work, and we were doing really well with that, and it was great. But it wasn't the firm that I had wanted to have. We were fine. It was good. But that was not the firm that I set out to be. And so we were also really struggling with, I may have high standards, just a smidge. And so I needed a second partner. It was never designed to be a solo shop. I had professional staff, but not another partner. And it's really hard to be a one partner audit firm. Insurance companies will likely make you have a concurring partner review, which means you have to go outside the firm. It becomes actually more expensive. The cost of delivery at a small firm can actually exceed some of the others. There's some negative connotations that's gotten a little bit better. That assurance at smaller firms is not as good, but guess what? My peer reviews were spectacular. And even other firms that I went to, my peer review was better. We were killing it, but it was becoming really hard to run. And without that extra partner, and what we would do, so here's a trick to interview partners. I find finding a business partner as important as finding a spouse, and having to interview them. I mean, you don't date your coworkers, but the same interview process that you would consider the courtship process of dating. And so what we would do is we would contract with somebody to do work, and we'd outsource the work to the potential partner. And I'd have my most trusted staff work on that engagement with them and staff it from my staff. My staff know me well. My staff are very well trained, and I'd have them report back. What is the quality of the work that you're seeing out of that principal or partner level person? Are they good to work with? All this different stuff. We couldn't find anybody that was strong enough to work with. And so it was just becoming really untenable to have that kind of practice, when also the marketplace was perceiving small firms to be like they could buy an opinion out of me. And that was not the case. Now, the forensic work was doing really well, and we loved that work. It was great, but it's feast or famine. And what was happening was the CAS work was becoming so stable and great, and it's great. It was great work, but my staff were wanting to do the forensics, and that was providing the stability of the firm, but we were losing that kind of passion associated with what the work we wanted to do. So it was a disconnect for me, and I got I met up with another firm that we highly respected in the marketplace, and so we rolled into that practice to be a part of the bigger unit, and that was the big decision to go. But it's not that it's bad to be a small firm. It was just becoming really hard to manage the intersection of this. Easy to be profitable, easy to do all that stuff. Actually, shockingly easy to sell work. I did not have a problem selling work. We actually had a problem okay, that's too much work. We can't take that on. But it was finding the right mix and how to balance the stability of the practice and the feast or famine nature of the work we want to do, and then the recurring work actually eating up the capacity. So there's all those different moving parts. And when you're at a small firm, you just don't have as much play and flexibility and levers to pull when you're managing.
It totally.
That was long-winded, sorry. You know me.
No, I think it painted a really good picture. Definitely all of that resonated with me as a firm owner myself, especially the payroll piece. That one's still,
Yeah, it's scary.
my firm is 37 people, still stressed out on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now and then. I think the one thing I caveat I would put on yours is that that litigation. That one really is feast or famine compared to a lot that we do, which is advisory. It is, we have made it more regular.
Incredibly recurring. And actually, here's another thing that was interesting. Because I made the base part of the practice, I wanted to have a stability part of the practice. And that's why we were taking the CAS style work, especially coming off their forensics, and I wanted that stability piece. We were actually so stable on this stuff that we didn't have like an off-season like lull where we had to cut our prices to rock bottom and sell work below market. So that actually made it as a competitive disadvantage because I built a more sustainable business model for the core ongoing, like the stable part of the practice, that we didn't have this just like lull in the summer months where we just discount engagements by 50, 75% or do them at cost or anything like that. So actually in some cases we were being undercut by larger practices. And we're having to try to reconcile that. How are they doing it for that price? Oh, okay, because they're actually going below cost. So that was getting hard to manage. That doesn't happen obviously in all the different niches, but it was an area that was like a lot of surprises in running a practice that I wasn't anticipating from that.
So bottom line for some of that maybe practitioner side that's listening, if you're thinking about starting your own firm, what you heard both of us really say too, it's basically specialize, but also make sure that you're understanding what's that core. Because we had that originally as well too. We had that core piece, which was the lower end of the IT services. And we kind of had that as our base. Now we've managed to move upstream, and our upstream is actually our core, but definitely.
But that base gives you so much peace of mind at night and the ability to have that recurring flow, building the good client relationships. They refer you to everybody. It's really solid work to have that foundational piece.
Yeah. I think in accounting that we too often forget that we have to put our own mask on first, like in an airplane, right? Put our own mask on first before we help others. And our whole thing is, oh, there's clients, I got to help the clients, I got to do all this stuff. And we're giving so much of ourselves that we're not taking that time to take care of ourselves. It's part of the reason why at the center, we created this whole personal resilience program, which is really, for you to be that strong rock and foundation for the clients, you need to be solid yourself first. So it really is a matter of taking care of ourselves, and then we can take care of others. In fact, we can take care of more others, the stronger that we are as a foundation. And that's also why a lot of what we do is based in teams, because then even if you're faltering, some of the teammates can jump in to cover or to allow you the time to rest so that you can rest, but we're still holding everybody up. So that's why I think working together in a team is so important, as well as taking care of yourself. All right, and then eventually you made the change into the vendor side. What made you decide to go, I'm not going to be a practitioner, and now I'm going to help build tools that help other auditors?
I will say there's a lot of stuff that I miss about public practice, but there's actually an element by leaving public practice, I got to spend the most time on some of the theory stuff that I enjoyed the most. So by having to support like global firms and global points of view on things, and in small firms and large firms, and having to understand all these different areas, the parts that I super nerded out about, I get to spend my days doing that. So for me, it was the kind of next frontier of the next problem. We were trying to take the forensic practice at the time and turn it into a recurring service line to combat that feast or famine. And the plan I had at the time, and so this is now the better part of a decade ago, so kind of an old approach, but just for history lesson for everybody, what we were doing was we're taking everybody that knew forensics and had forensic skills and competencies and turning that into a data analytics practice to be more proactive in nature and thereby get the business model to fit. And so then it doesn't become this peak and valley, it becomes the more stable and effectively, maybe I'll make up a word, casify the nature of forensics to turn it into a high-end data analytics practice. And so when I started to work with the vendors on how to make this space, it was just such an opportunity to get to go work in AI before AI was cool, that I just couldn't pass up some of the opportunities and how amazing it is to work on the problems that I'm working on. Like I have a patent now on how to apply anomaly detection for risk assessment. Like I wouldn't have had that opportunity in practice, but I still was working on those kinds of issues. I wanted to go extra nerdy is I guess the best way to put it.
That's a great point, but the reason I ask you this too is this: I think people underestimate just the multitude of career paths. A lot of times, especially students coming in, they hear it's basically public accounting, work your way up to partner, or at a certain point you go off and you become a controller or CFO somewhere, or work in internal audit somewhere, and that's kind of it. And there's actually so many other things that you can get involved in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If someone was interested in sort of and I'm going to pause because I was going to say career path, but your career path really windy, as mine sort of is too. But what advice would you have for someone, say, just starting out, or they just started working? What's kind of your advice to them?
And they're some
They're
tough stuff.
interested in eventually doing either your forensics or doing this other.
I would think the most important one always remains, and even in AI times today, remains even more true, if not as true as it was before, is that kind of curious mindset. Even if you're working on the most boring of tasks of all time, there's actually an element that you can still engage mentally. You just have to find it. So, for example, I also like to hire non-traditional professionals myself, just because I like people that think about problems a different way. I actually really like a lot of, you have to have psychological safety for this. So let's just start with, you have to have psychological safety on your team. But I like this kind of cognitive dissonance where everybody comes at it at a certain different viewpoint, almost debate style concept. Because I think if we can all come to an agreement when we're coming at it at different points of view, the end result is stronger. So I really like people with alternative backgrounds as compared to like overly traditional, because they think about a problem differently. So I had hired one of my staff, and if he's hearing this, he knows who he is, that had moved to Houston and is effectively a former tennis pro. And I had to give him the most horrible task as his first job as contract, because I just needed help on this big forensic investigation, big Ponzi scheme investigation. Like, this is the one that's going to break me out in my firm, and it did. I needed him to trace cash transactions of the transfers, both sides, put together an inventory. And this is before all the tools that helped you do all this. And I mean, it was like 80 hours of like vouching both sides of the transactions and putting it together. And I was like, please don't quit. Just please don't quit. And he came to me, I remember it very vividly, and he said, Danielle, I don't understand this series of transactions I'm seeing. And I was like, okay, you're paying attention while you're doing the work. Oh, okay. That's something new. That's great. And he actually caught a new scheme that we were not aware of, associated some weird voiding issues, because he'd just been paying attention while he was doing, I mean, mind-numbingly tedious work. I was like, I will pay you extra, whatever you have to do to not quit, because this task is that tedious. But he brought with it this mindset of, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to pay attention while I'm doing my work. And he was totally jamming out. We had headphones. We were like, let's go and let's hammer this out. But that's, to me, the profession may have tasks that remain that are tedious. But as all of us on the vendor space work to create like the different intelligent automations to create the automation, you still have to be paying attention. So what's going to be tedious is going to be different. And so I've been actually quoted that the new tedious is going to be fact checking. And that's what's going to be the new, just tedious, monotonous task is you're going to still have to fact check even when you have AI automations running and helping you things. So it's how do you keep that critical mindset running, even if you think you're doing something tedious and boring, but actually there's so much information to absorb when you're doing something like, does this make sense? Does everything I'm looking at make sense? Does it make sense to this other information? My husband also calls my ability to read like financial statements and walk into a warehouse and just understand things, seeing the matrix. Because I'm so hyper aware of everything that's happening, like I'm really observant, that I just absorb a lot, and then I can make relationships and have like these running hypotheses and find when something doesn't make sense. So my brain's just constantly running. It is hard to go to sleep sometimes. I will admit. You can see I'm high energy. But I think for staff that are looking to what can you make the most out of your career, even if you are early stage professional, are doing something that would like, oh, this one is I can't wait to get to that next one. Just kind of still have that questioning mindset and that in curiosity. Again, long-winded. I'm so long-winded.
You're good. You're good. But I think that is excellent advice, right? Because it's kind of the same, and we hear it a lot where and I've seen some people that have done internships at large firms or actually at Big Four go, oh my God, I never want to do accounting again. And I kind of again agree. It's like it's about perspective, and so maybe you didn't have the right supervisor. If you're having to do something, are you really understanding what you're doing, or are you just doing it? And if you're just doing it,
and that tedious one that that was on a major Ponzi scheme investigation that like we got to meet with the FBI and the State Securities Board and like the IRS Criminal Enforcement Division, and like I mean there is cool stuff happening on that engagement. Like the number of people that I say like that ask how can you be a young tenured staff on a forensics investigation, like this is the Super Bowl of types of engagements. But yet there's still some work that is not quite as great. I think that's everybody's job too.
I think so. I think so. Well, this definitely, I think lends well where people can see, and I maybe you just kind of told us, but a lot of times people say we're like superheroes. Well, maybe heroes as an accountant, or people don't think of us as accountants. But have you ever felt like you've saved the day for your client?
Yes. Yes, I have. And I
Story?
can't fully tell the story, but there was one. I did have to be a complete jerk in order to do it. I dressed somebody down very deeply and said, "Get outside right now. Get your lawyer on the call." There were some cuss words in there because the client wasn't listening. I completely ignored the client and spoke directly to his attorney. I didn't care, but he had to be present, obviously. He was pushing back on me and saying, no, no, no. And I go, tell me what law firm. I will call your law firm, but I can't even tell you what the problem is. I need your lawyer immediately. I was a complete jerk. I mean, world-class jerk. And I saved them so much money, almost $20 million, that they were about to, within the next 12 hours, about to sign themselves up for a $20 million liability that I can't exactly explain how it was. And when I got on the call with the lawyer and I explained who I was and what I was doing, the lawyer was like, oh my God, oh my God. Okay, come to our offices now. The lawyer knew exactly what was happening. The lawyer understood. He understood why I couldn't tell the client. The client still doesn't have any clue what's going on. I said, it's okay. Just stop doing whatever you're doing and let me talk to your lawyer. And so I still have a great relationship with that. I got so many other engagements referred from that lawyer and that entire team of that. But and so you can probably find lots of criticism that I should not have been that jerky to the lawyer, the client, but the client did not. I was not in a position where I could tell the client without their lawyer present because that created more risk for them, and they did not know that.
Yep.
They did not understand. There was a lot of circumstances that they couldn't understand and I couldn't tell them in the appropriate way. And so there was an element where being forceful and not overly handholdy and whatnot did save the day. And that is not the right approach for every circumstance. Other times it's you need to have the tissue box ready to go and just be the dumping grounds for a client. But I think that's where EQ, emotional intelligence skills, as a service professional in this space are so important in understanding how do you deal with the circumstance. Like when we do, like again, the forensics one, we have to be careful sometimes about not getting too excited about a particular finding because this is our client's worst day, worst case scenario. But we found it. We're so excited, but we can't go into a meeting excited. And we have to understand that their tone is going to be, oh my gosh, this is catastrophic. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. How am I going to survive this? I'm losing my livelihood because this is my business. And that's does it. I'm not going to yell at a client during that time. That's not going to happen. We're going to sit there and be supportive and leave meeting time to have the tissues there to have it. And so it's, to me, the hero status is the concept of being able to meet the client where they need, what they need you to be, not and for those doing assurance, not in violation of your own independence, obviously. But being what they need you to be, but understanding what that is and not overstepping, but also putting their interests first. Once that client that I was a complete jerk to understood what had happened and I was able to explain it after I talked to his lawyer and we were on the way to the lawyer's office, he was so thankful that I ignored every single one of his requests of what he thought I should be doing next because I actually did do what was in his best interest. He just didn't understand it at the time. And so I think there's a lot. And then, of course, in those situations, you do have to make sure they understand and like not just a jerk for the sake of being a jerk. So I think that, yeah, EQ skills.
that I'm definitely with that story. And I know others that you've been involved in from talking to me before that. I'm going to call that your superpower. Let's flip that. What is
Okay.
critical vulnerability? Superman had kryptonite or Supergirl had kryptonite. What's
Oh,
your
yeah. So it's similar because I can really understand the emotional state of a situation. Like it's a lot of empathy. I get easily excited and easily disheartened. So I take the emotional roller coaster with it. That's really hard on me individually. I have been in clients' offices crying as we have to, work on a RIF or a reduction in force with them because of a fraud event. I had one time where I was so profusely bawling about a situation while driving to the FBI's offices. While we were moving offices, my staff back at the office were dealing with the office move. And they're like, Danielle, do you want us to just call you back later when you can compose yourself? And I was like, I don't have time to compose myself to talk later. I'm going to be at the FBI's office without a phone. So because of that, I probably shouldn't admit too much that I cry as much as I do, apparently. But there's an element where the good also comes with some bad, and I have to do a lot to make sure I don't get overly excited or overly downtrodden. And how do I keep that levelness as best as I can that you expect from a professional, but still not like shove it down so that I overly explode. People that know me know I tend to talk loudly, including my children, and excited and very sternly at some things. But how do you kind of balance that aspect of it? Because I think it's the same concept of Superman and the kryptonite. Let's nerd out for a second. That's actually from his home planet, and it's part of who he is already. But that's also his own adversity.
That's so well said. I do feel as well that my EQ and I actually have the same vulnerability. I get very emotional just receiving. I've had clients cry on me. I end up crying with them, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, it's gonna be okay, right? And but I also think that's the power of why we are as good as what we do, because you do have that empathy, that compassion for that client. And
Mm-hmm.
while you may be composed when you're in front of them, you go later on, you're like, oh my gosh.
But they can also understand that genuineness. Like when you work with a client, you're really able to come to something that works on, and they feel that genuine, even when things go wrong. Like you build some and forge some long-term relationships that are great for not only just your own personal development, but your career development and network.
Agree. And that genuineness is really why people come back. And even for us, like with clients we've worked with, even when we've screwed up, and there was a couple times we've screwed up majorly, the client was like, well, we understand people make mistakes. Yes, this is a big mistake. We're glad you're rectifying it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll keep working with you.
Those ones are never fun. Never fun.
But they wouldn't happen, I think, if you didn't, as you said,
Yeah.
have that connection with that client. And if you were
Absolutely.
just a service provider and everything was just cut and dry, and this is what I'm doing for you, and here's your report, and here's the stuff, that you would not get those opportunities with those clients. They would be like, yep, thanks, let me find somebody else.
Indeed.
Well, since you mentioned connecting, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn. Danielle Supkis Cheek. The whole name is what you can find me on LinkedIn. The good news is Supkis is rare enough. You'll only find a handful of family members if you just go with Supkis, Supkis.
Yeah, so I think she said Supkis.
Indeed.
Smell that, yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being on the podcast today. I hope some people found some inspiration as well as some great advice, I think, on how to handle clients from this talk today. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Donny.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.